Yay! We're live. Yay! I like it. I like it. Hold on one second. So hopefully everybody will start to join and say hello. Happy
Julia.
And most importantly, happy Friday.
Oh my God, it's my favorite day.
A good week. And now we're almost there. We're almost at the weekend, but this is a super important conversation that we're about to have. And I'm really excited to have you here. So we can wait a couple of minutes and then see as more people join. Are you ready?
Never been more ready.
That's what I like to hear, especially on a Friday.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to hear any questions that'll come up.
Me too. Hold on, let me make sure everybody can see me. Do we like this view better? I think this is a good view. Hold on. Or do we like that view better?
Whatever you prefer.
This one as well. This is a good look. So yes, we've made it. We made it. This is the most important. The sun is shining in beautifully behind you.
Yeah, I mean, the mix of snow and sun is maybe my favorite weather. I'm Swedish. I grew up in Stockholm, and it sounds so cliche, but whenever I see this type of weather, I just feel right at home.
It's like, yes, this is the perfect. I'm with you. Like, I didn't have this kind of weather growing up, but I've lived in Munich long enough. It's perfect. The sun is shining. Wow. I was just about to sing "Sun is shining where there is." Yeah, that's not necessarily.
We're all heard in a musical. I love it.
Exactly. We're not necessarily invoking vibes of snow, more like beach and happiness, but not snow.
Fair enough.
Do you know something? Let's just plod on, and then when anyone wants to say hi, they can come and say hi. We've told them to feel free. We're here. We're ready. So let's go for it. So thank you anyway for joining, Ida. I'm super happy that you're here, especially because we are talking about making an impact. And as I said in my post, this year really is what I've coined the year of impact. It's not about really wasting our time anymore just talking, but actually putting that into, when I say deliverables, I just mean into action, that people can really see that it's not just you're talking about things, this is what you say you care about, but actually what are you doing about it? What happens in your day-to-day life? So tell us, first of all, a little bit about you, a little bit about your story, and you in your role of founder of Becoming, and how you make your impact. So the stage, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and also maybe to talk a bit about what impact even is. Because if there's anything I've observed right now is that there are so many definitions flying around, and we're all just trying to wrap our heads around it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, my name is Ida. I'm the founder of Becoming, and this is a change agency that uses branding and strategic communications to help impact startups become role models in their industries. Because at the moment, we need some really good success stories of what it can look like to really integrate impact in business. Mm-hmm. So that's my passion where I stand right now. And let me give you some, as you said, story background. I started as a film director in Sweden. And I have this tendency that when I fall in love with something, a passion, an interest, it's like blinders. There's like nothing else that exists.
Right.
So I was all in on filmmaking, and the core question I was really curious about is what motivates people? Like, why do we have the ideas that we have? Why do we behave in certain ways? Because when you're coaching an actor, it's all about making sense of the actor. And I found that so fascinating. So I actually dropped out of high school when I was 16 to pursue film.
I'm sure your parents are really happy about that.
Best choice of my life, nerve-wracking for sure. And I'm really grateful to have grown up in Sweden where, I think people are challenging the status quo most of the time anyway. So that was a huge part of my life, but I found that these kinds of questions about humanity and people and behavior, they were driving me not just towards art, but also academia.
Right.
So I went back to school, I went full on social science, ended up in climate change campaigning, and eventually moved over to England to study social anthropology, which is not just anymore about how one person thinks, but about people in groups and cultural systems. fascinating. And from there, I kind of, in Swedish, we say on a shrimp sandwich, when something just magically easily happens.
Hold on. We have to take that for 2 seconds. On a shrimp sandwich.
Okay, if you ever remember one quote of mine, remember the shrimp sandwich.
That will be requested on a shrimp sandwich. Okay, I've got it. I'm ready.
Over from Cambridge into the London tech scene. It was a pretty easy transition because I had this toolkit of storytelling, but now also narrative cultural thinking. And I joined an artificial intelligence startup to try and figure out how we can shape the narrative around AI to be more applicable for healthcare, because that was the purpose of the company I was working for. Fascinating stuff. Happy to go into that more later on. And then I figured out London's not my city, came over to Berlin, joined the tech startup scene here, and now I'm bringing all of these different dots together. So the storytelling, the startup mentality, the tech stuff, and also the environmental impact, the social impact into one, which is what I'm trying to achieve here with Becoming.
I like that. I'm still thinking about, like, becoming for me embodies like being on a journey and getting there. And it could be anything, you know, I'm becoming a better person. I'm becoming an impactful person. I'm on this journey, but I like the fact that you're bringing all these multi-dimensional sides to yourself together to bring it into this one amazing thing. And that makes, but that's what makes life interesting. You know, I think sometimes we view and think about success, or what, even the way we think about impact, we think about it as, you know, you must have hit these particular goals to make an impact. But actually, that's not the case. You can still be strong in coming together to bring a brand to fruition, like you have done with Becoming, and then also passing on the baton to say, hey, you know something, I understand how people not only operate by themselves, but I understand that people are A, social animals, B, how they interact with each other, C, how they communicate with each other, and D, how do I put that, how do I translate my values externally? And I think that's awesome. I think that process right there is awesome.
I love it. And, you know, this mention of values is so crucial, because actually one really interesting thing that I've observed as well as changing in the business world, specifically among impact businesses, is this idea of competition as turning more into collaboration and community. And one of the ways that that's possible is because if you can really identify your own values as a founder, for example, and your own personality and your own strengths that you're bringing into the company, you will find that your brand and your company is unique. So even if you're offering certain services that other agencies, companies are too, there's always something unique to find in your value and your personality for your brand. And when you see it that way, it just gives it a completely different flavor, because you can own that completely and collaborate with other people in an ecosystem rather than just being in this kind of competitive mindset.
Right. And I think that's, my phrase is, the secret sauce is you. You know, and I think a lot of the times, even just thinking about the business journey, is that, you know, at the very beginning, they say, you know, you're almost like Gollum with your idea, right? This is what I want to do, and I can't tell anybody. And if I tell anybody, they might steal my idea. But first of all, an idea is only ever that. But if you believe and know that the secret sauce is you, there is no element of competition with anybody else, because you know that you will in turn then find your tribe, and your tribe and my tribe won't be the same people. They may have crossover, they may even run parallel together, but they're still not the same. And I think the need for this kind of value set coming to the fore, I think it's potentially a little bit generational, but B, I think that with the pandemic, it's definitely exacerbated the need for values to be up front and center, because what we're seeing is at large is that people are, whether it's in the direction of Black people, whether it's talking about how to handle the pandemic, people are being disingenuous about what they're doing, you know, what they're saying versus what they're actually doing. There's a huge mismatch. And I think people are now, in general, at large, we're all becoming a lot more conscious. Now, apologies. We're all becoming a lot more conscious and aware as to how we spend our money, who we interact with, what kind of brands we care about and what kind of brands are for us. And I think social impact brands have the largest opportunity right now to truly make an impact, because I think this is what people genuinely want. They want to be aligned with companies who know what their values are, and that their values are higher, they have a higher purpose than just making money, but they actually want to help. They want to help another group of people. They want to help people, and there's so many forms of that, but I'll let you talk on a little bit more about impact. But yeah, like I think it's a different way of life that we now have in 2021.
Completely. And there's this survey called the Edelman Trust Barometer, for example, which shows that if you only compare last year to this year, there's been a complete shift in how people perceive companies' role to begin with solving social issues. So now it turns out actually that in sort of a public opinion survey, companies come out on top for having the most trust to tackle social issues in society. That's something that I've never seen before. And I think that when we think about companies as a word, sometimes we get the picture of the McDonald's of the world and the huge corporations and what they're doing. But first of all, there are so many startups that are doing business differently to begin with. Right. And these are the people that I really want to highlight and work with, because they can sort of be the trailblazers for a new version of a company. And the second thing is, as you said, like, it's just important to remember what entrepreneurship really is. It's about solving problems. And that can have such an impact, especially when the people who are given the opportunity to become founders are a diverse group of people that have a diverse group of experiences, because they're going to solve the problems they've experienced. It's just it's a completely different landscape that's changing every day toward empowering people to start businesses, to solve things, because it is a tool like any other. And the business world can really achieve something at scale to help people.
Right. And I think just to underscore your point about, solving a problem, the motivation behind solving this problem isn't just I solve the problem and I make money. The motivation is I solve the problem and I enable and empower more people than I could ever dream of helping as one person alone. The vehicle that you choose to have an impact, the vehicle that you choose to use to help more people is your business. But but the motivation is different. And I think sometimes we have to be clear on that motivation being different, because I think, at one particular time it was, let me launch the next business to be bigger than Facebook, to be bigger than Snapchat, to be bigger than whatever. But I don't think people have that same motivation to say, I just want to be bigger than, but actually I want to touch the lives of X 100,000, X million people. And I think that's also changing the way people do business. Because if you and I now talk and say, well, hey, I'm impacting, I'm dealing with 1,000 people, and you say, I'm dealing with 5,000 people. Well, together we can still deal with more. But if we're still in that same mindset of I'm an island, I just want to make money, that's my goal, I think that also closes us off to opportunity if the motivations for us wanting to do it aren't right.
Yeah, completely. And there's so many things to pick up on there. Like, where do I begin?
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. So, one thing that I do think is really important, which I love that you mentioned, you said first maybe 1,000, and then you just said, what if I impact 1 billion people? That's important to still stick to ambition. Just because we've really associated entrepreneurship with profit-driven ambition doesn't mean that all of a sudden company building shouldn't be ambitious. The reason you choose to not only become a community leader locally, for example, but also starting a company is because you have an idea about how you can scale. And you think that your solution, your ideas can impact more people. So even though you're totally right that it should never just be about bigger than, it's still the case that ambition has a big role to play, because we need ambitious people solving huge societal and environmental problems. So that would be the first thing. And then your second point, which I also think is so important, is how we work together. So
camera seems to be having a crazy day today. I'm sorry.
Just let me know if there's a pure blackout and we'll improvise.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm here.
Good. Well, so, with your 1,000 and my 5,000, as you said, that's exactly the right approach too. And another organization I'm working with and proud to be working with is called W Lounge, which is basically a community organization here in Berlin, but a global network that introduces founders to investors, to corporates, to the public sector to try and get win-win situations to maximize all of their impact. Because some of the time, it's just much easier to scale when you have an entire ecosystem on board. And at the end of the day, with impact, which we'll get into, it's a complex thing. You're operating in a system anyway, and you're going to need multiple players to support your mission. So that's a great point. It's never just going to be your company. It'll always be about your shareholders, but your stakeholders and your ecosystem and community.
And I think, there's so much that you said once again, and I'm like, okay, I don't know where to start with this. So let me start at the end. There's really one good point that you've made, especially about what you do with W Lounge, which is really a key part of growth. And back to one of your original points about people feeling empowered to become entrepreneurs is access. And this is one of the biggest parts, access. And access is one of the things without it, a lot of times. And when I say access, I'm not necessarily always talking about to people. I'm talking about to methods of scaling up. I'm talking about to knowledge about how to even start a business. I'm talking about how to go and find, and people say Google everything, but Google isn't, the solution to all problems. But sometimes it's about, for some people, it's like, oh, how do I even know how to go and find a corporate lawyer? All these sorts of things. And access really is one of the biggest issues that anybody faces on this journey. And when there are resources that help you to broaden your horizon and provide you with access and get you into rooms that you wouldn't normally be in, I think that in itself is priceless.
It is. And, this really reminds me of one of the things that I personally really believe, which is that your values and how you approach other people and the kinds of intentions that you set. For example, is your intention to be useful at every time when you meet someone? That's going to be a completely different interaction compared to if you're protecting your own resources. And one of the most beautiful things about being part of W Lounge, which wants to create a more diverse entrepreneurship ecosystem here, and therefore obviously is opening a lot of doors, you just see a completely different kind of interaction and a completely different vibe in the groups of people because everyone's there to support each other. And I wanted to say that my definition of impact has two kinds of levels. One is the long term, and that's what you in a business would do to connect the dots, set your KPIs. But then there's the immediate impact of how you are a role model, even if you intend it or even if you don't. The way you carry yourself and the kinds of values and intentions you bring into your everyday life and all of your business interactions, they change people around you. So if you are radically open and generous, you are having an impact, even if none of the things that you actively do, so to say, for work, gives you that impression. And I think so much power in that because it means that anyone can start to be deliberate about this today.
Right. And it also means that, and I'd say the key part of that also is if you truly believe in what you're doing, I think that's the key, because you will start to, now it's not easy by any sense of the imagination, but you will then start to walk and present yourself in a way that aligns itself to your values. But that doesn't also happen by accident. As you said, you have to be intentional about it. You have to be clear as to what your values are. You have to be clear as to how you're going to achieve them. But once you know that, as you said, you can start in that exact minute. You can say, well, do you know something? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And that comes also, I think, I know you're more of an expert on this than I am, but I think that is where people also make better decisions when it comes to brand alignment. Because once you know what you stand for, the decisions you then make as a result of that are very different. Because, at a certain point in time, you might think, well, you know something, it might be great for me to take this. I have no idea. I'm really sorry today. It might be great for me to take this opportunity to, I don't know, work with McDonald's. By the way, I've got nothing against McDonald's. I'm just saying, I'm just using it for example. But, you know, you're thinking it's a good opportunity, but who knows, it might not be an opportunity that's in line with your brand. You might think, you know, the brand, the money of McDonald's, it could be great. But actually, when you're walking in your own truth and walking in a way that says everything that I do reflects the impact that I want to make, everything that I do reflects the values, you might say to yourself, you know what, it would have been great. However, my values say to me, it's more important that I do something else because I'm really clear as to who I am and I'm clear as to the impact I'd like to make or the people that I would like to touch. And because I'm sure about that, I can't take this.
Yeah. And I think I've seen some really good examples of companies and organizations that stick to their values. So they don't even plan so concretely. It's more that the value system becomes a compass as opposed to a map. And
Right.
you use that to guide your decisions, which is actually also very much a competitive advantage to be that agile, to use another buzzword. Because you're trying when you're trying to have an impact in a system that's always evolving, which is the case for any human or environmental community, basically, then you do need to have an openness about your methods. Because we can sit and say in our planning and in our minds that this particular product is for sure going to solve this problem. But then you go out there and you're hopefully really engaged with the communities you're trying to impact. And all of a sudden that didn't work out. And then being agile in that sense and using your values to try and find the best solution as opposed to committing to the solution because of it, that's going to be super important. And values is a key building block to get there. And I think also with the McDonald's type example, depending on what your mission is, it could be a brilliant experience to try and shift a huge brand in a certain direction. It's just all about whether it fits how you perceive your own impact and what change you're really trying to make.
Right, agreed. So here's the question for you. What was your turning point when you decided that this, you know, becoming, when was the becoming for your becoming? No, but when did you decide that this was what you wanted to do and you saw the clarity of your direction?
You know, when you have something brewing in the back of your mind or in your gut feeling for ages, and then suddenly you start putting the pieces together, that's the kind of gradual experience that I would say that I had. There were some moments that kind of resembled an epiphany. I mean, the first one was when I was in high school, really long time ago, when we studied the environmental impact in all kinds of subjects at the same time. It was about the impact on my health. It was about the impact on, obviously, like nature and animals, and all of these things were just coming together in the same week. And I had this epiphany of like, what the hell? Like, what am I doing? I became a vegetarian overnight, actually vegan for a year. Yeah, went straight into climate change campaigning and tried to like use my skills in whatever ways I could to solve this massive problem. So that's again with the blinders, you know, once an idea is there,
you're locked and loaded, and that's it, like no left, no right.
All in. And then I took this kind of detour through academia to try and build my philosophy of things and the world. And came out in the startup world and was kind of distracted and learning tons. And then I found myself, speaking of Google, I Googled social entrepreneurship. And you know what? I found academic resources first, which to me was really weird because I was thinking like, surely there are tons of people that are social entrepreneurs. And if I Google on social entrepreneurship, why am I not seeing these people? Why am I having an academic debate about what counts as a social entrepreneur? I was so confused. And I figured that there's a gap between what we know that people are doing and what we hear that people are doing. Right. And that's when I really realized that I want to be a part of filling that gap. And there are structural reasons why a lot of people aren't willing to talk about their impact as much as they maybe would like to. And I want to be a part of solving that and really creating role models, because unless we can imagine what that would look like, we can't build more companies like that.
Right. No, that is a valid point. And when to your point about, I didn't have an epiphany moment. I can't say it was an epiphany, but it was definitely something, like you said, that was brewing, sitting inside me personally. And you think about, what's it like to be, what's it like being a woman in the corporate world? What's it like being a Black woman in the corporate world? What's it like when you are the only one? What does all of that look like? What does it mean? Why is it the case? Why is it the case? And I think, like, last year as well was one of those moments, I think you would have seen it too, that a lot of not just Black people, but specifically Black women became very open about our experiences. And once I saw that, I couldn't tune it. When I say tune it out, I didn't want to tune it out, but I couldn't ignore that it resonated with me inside. And as you said, seeing companies saying stuff but not doing stuff is one of the biggest bugbears that I have, and not even just a bugbear. It's more than that, because at the end of the day, you see so much about, oh yeah, this is our initiative, but what are they really doing? I think they had a few years ago talking about, like, the big tech companies, show us your diversity in leadership. 5 years, 6 years, nothing changed. And at a certain point, like you said, you want to take things into your own hands to say, do you know something? It's not good enough for me to Google it and have a look to see what's going on and see that there's no change. And it might not be that you start with the big guns, you might start small, but impact doesn't always have to be on this grandiose level. It can actually just be from starting where you stand.
Yes. And see, this is why I love working in the impact space, because I get to listen to stories like that every day. It's just so amazing. Like, you know what? Once I wrote to a Nobel Peace Prize nominee on LinkedIn, which is, by the way, my strategy for everything. I just write people for no reason. So please write me as well if you have any
questions.
And I asked her, I said I admire her work. She's a nonviolent activist. Mm-hmm. And I asked her, what's your advice for life, pretty much? And she said, for your work, put your effort where your heart breaks. That will make you happy. And I thought that was so beautiful. So, wherever you feel this tension and strife and unfairness, injustice, all these things, there's such a powerful engine to really create change. And there are so many people that will be willing to come on board with that as well, as long as you're able to communicate it. So yeah, thanks for sharing that with me. And I'm like, I want to be on that.
Let me do it. Let's do it. I'm there.
Exactly. This is what happens when you really communicate your values. Like, humans respond to that. And especially in this day and age, there's no excuse not to communicate your values and your beliefs. So great to see.
As long as it's authentic, because authenticity is that's the part that communicates. It's that part of your story where you said, I had an epiphany moment and I was learning about, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to be a vegan, and you did. That resonates with that whole, do you know something? She just said, damn it, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to make a change. And people understand that, and you understand that from 2 points, right? You understand that from the perspective of fear. Because sometimes, just deciding to make a huge change is absolutely scary. It's what you don't know, because even though you believe and it's the right thing, as we both know, you still come up against doubters, people who say, no, it's not a good idea, it's not going to work. But then you also, as you said, you feel that elation, that happiness, knowing that you're doing something that really means something to you. And if you can change not just the perspective, but if you can change and impact the life of one person that's not yourself, you feel like you've done a good job. And that's the part that motivates you to go on, keep doing what you're doing. And, one of the things I was talking about, or wrote in the post, to say, we were talking about moving from conversation to action. And sometimes that's the hardest part. You start with the action and you get pushback, no, and you keep coming back. But I think that's part of the curve, right? Is that knowing that it won't necessarily run smooth. It won't necessarily be easy. But but here I am again. It won't necessarily be easy, but what we do also know is we can't revert back to just conversation. We can't just revert back to talking about things that we would like to achieve in a millennia from now, someday, when we have to still keep having these kinds of conversations to motivate us, but still to still keep doing what it is that we set out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally believe that the two really do go together because, as you said, it's a motivating thing. It's not only motivating, it's also sometimes shifting the nature of the conversation when you have it enough times. I mean, impact as a conversation is completely different now than it used to be. And for example, when I was working with that AI startup and we were doing health tech, there was still a huge conversation around how dangerous AI is. And since then, only in these few short years, it's really shifted towards how much technology can achieve for impact, for health, for people. And it's so fascinating. That's kind of how I see my work as well, and especially working with startups, that it's not just about communicating what you do, it's also communicating what you think is possible for an industry or what you think is even possible to achieve, so that you're also actively changing the market by your thought leadership and your ideas and your product essentially too. To kind of set the stage for other people to start building and authentically doing, as you said. So I do think that the two really, really go together. But I mean, it's also a huge topic, this purpose washing and greenwashing and people claiming to be doing things that they're not, which is why I am committed to only working with companies that have social and environmental impact built into the business model.
Right. Because
so when the business scales, the impact scales. It's not CSR, it's not an add-on, it's integral to the business.
Absolutely. And that's really the point. And that's why I'm 100% with you, is that for me, when I'm looking at companies who, I'm not saying that large companies can't make changes. We know that they can, and they have the resources to, but I'm with you absolutely that smaller companies who are more agile can go on this journey from the beginning at their apps, even from the point where they're trying to look for funding. It's a key point. Like, how are you really tackling anti-racism or racial injustice and gender equality? How are you tackling that from the get-go? How is it a part of your ongoing strategy that this is something you will focus on? It's not enough to say, well, we'll think about it when we face the problem.
Truly. And what I really realized when I started exploring entrepreneurship, I basically thought that if you're a CEO of a company, you're the head of it all, every decision lies with you, thank you, bye. That is not how a company runs. And when it comes to defining your business model and your metrics, there are also other people that are influencing that. Most of all, for a startup, your investors, and of course, different shareholders that you have. So that's really encouraging to look at the impact investment landscape and how, to what extent businesses that are forming now are also not even just encouraged, but demanded to have other ways of measuring their impact that isn't just profit related. And that's why I think it's so important to see it in a system with different stakeholders that all can drive impact in their own way. Because when investors encourage startups to have these metrics, startups build their businesses differently, they communicate differently because they're doing something differently, and that changes consumer patterns, and consumer patterns change what businesses are founded to begin with, and on it goes.
Right.
Everyone is needed in this equation.
Correct. And just to add onto the top is that you also have to make sure that the people who are in these groups, who are the decision makers, the people who are driving this process, also, from my standpoint, as in focusing on Black women, even being, at the junior levels, they still need to reflect this. Leadership's obviously important, but actually having a pipeline, it needs to be reflected at the point. It needs to be demanded from the investors. It needs to be demanded not just in the board, but actually, what is the makeup of your team? Not just the founding team, because sometimes founding teams are what they are, but how are you looking to really make sure that you are willing, not even willing, you're going to make sure that your team is diverse, You're going to make sure that your team has a cross section of people, and it's not because you feel forced to do it, but you actually understand the benefit of it, and not just the social benefit, but also or the moral benefit, but also that there is a tangible financial benefit that's associated with it. You know, they say your business can benefit, by 158% in growth if you have somebody from your target audience in your team. So what's your real understanding? Because I think there's so many different ways we can make impact, and I obviously focus on one side of it, but I think on a broader level, companies should be looking not just at environmental things, but also gender inequality, racial injustice, all these sorts of things, to really make sure that their businesses are robust. Because as much as businesses do dictate consumer habits, consumers also dictate what they want from their brands, from their companies.
Yeah, absolutely. This is another one that has so many different components.
I know. But this is the nature of the conversation you and I have. So I knew it was going to go this way. So I'm going to let you forever.
You'll help me. We'll start somewhere. I mean, you know, one of the first things I think about when I think about change and integrating impact in an existing organization, which sounds like what you're describing, that gives me my anthropology hat. And thinking about change management and the basic principle that business is people to people. And you already mentioned fear. And I think that as much as we have all sorts of evidence for what diversity does for a business and what purpose does for a business, there's something about change, there's something about comfort that doesn't sit right with a lot of people. And I think it takes a lot of guts to be a change agent in an environment like that. And it takes a lot of thought leadership. And I commend you for that, because my approach has been work with startups, work with the people who get it, work with the people who are doing it differently, and run with them. And then the other people will eventually catch up because they won't have a choice. That's a different battle to choose compared to what you just described. And I have so much respect for that. It's hard.
But I think we're covering it. Let's say we're covering it from, let's say, two different generations, not as in our ages, but I think the point is that a lot of companies now, they have management that is, dare we say it, old-fashioned, not necessary. They're in touch with loads of things, but they're not necessarily in touch with what consumers require, but also what employees now require. And I think, you know, the combination of George Floyd and, you know, Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on, but also the pandemic has meant that whilst employers are in a very strong position on the one hand, if they don't understand the demands of their employees and their consumers, there won't be any business. And there you'll come with all your new brands and like, hey, we are ready to scoop up all of this business, because there are so many companies who, not just companies and people who understand what is needed right now, which is you have to be aware of the issues that are affecting the world. You can't just sit in your ivory tower anymore and say, well, hey, I'm protected. Well, you can on the one hand because you're buffered by money, but on the other hand, if you care about your business having any sort of real longevity, the approach you're going to have to take is going to be very different. And I think this is why, for me, year of 2021 is a year of impact, because I think this is going to be the year where a lot of larger companies, and dare I say it, dinosaur-like companies in their method, are going to have to catch up very quickly that lip service, throwing money at problems, is no longer going to be acceptable as it has previously been. This is not the method we can now have going forward, because what we all demand is a lot more.
Preach.
You're meant to come back now and say yes, and then, you know, just finish everybody off and then drop the mic. This is, you know, I'm handing them.
Your mic drop moment. We can just stop here.
No. You're the guest. That's right.
It's so important, and honestly, I think it goes for anything in life that timing is not to be underestimated.
Right.
And with COVID, there's been a shift again in the conversation in terms of what role businesses can play in solving social challenges in general. simply because, I mean, we saw people pivot left and right. We saw companies changing their whole manufacturing systems to create things for the pandemic or to relieve the pandemic and the effects of it. And purpose is on the agenda more than ever, both from the employer branding perspective, as you were mentioning, but also actually in terms of the products and the outward community. So this is really the time. And that's also why I'm so excited to be a part of this now. There is so much momentum. It's coming from the investment side. It's coming from the startup side. It's coming from the corporate side. It's coming as well from public sector. For example, if you look also at the European Commission and how they're allocating resources, a lot of it is going towards climate change. It's going towards innovative entrepreneurship. And these forces also have an impact on the wider climate of business. So it's happening. 2021 is the year of impact. I feel like I can tell you right now that from everything I'm seeing, I can validate that assessment. And that sometimes what we need is a better, more closely knit community between the people like us and also the people in corporates who might feel like the only ones trying to drive this, for us to have a tighter conversation and not feeling alone in that. So for example, two communities that I'm deeply involved in now is, on the one hand, mostly European, but global as well, community called Business of Purpose. And this is centered on connecting purpose professionals across the world, across silos, people who have a values-driven mission in their work, no matter where they work. It's a perfect place to be. So if you're purpose-driven, join. Also an organization coming out of North America, Canada, and the US called the Global Impact Relations Network.
I've seen that.
About building new methods for using strategic communications toward impact. And I think just being part of these communities, and W Lounge, as we mentioned, that gives me so much fuel. And we shouldn't underestimate that. So I'm also on that level really grateful to be talking to you right now, and I'll bring that energy into my next coming weeks.
Yeah, no, listen, same. And it's good to always know that there are so many of us working on things that have a higher purpose, that it's, and when I say a higher purpose, that we want to help, we want to change. Do you know something? Sadiq, we're going to say we want to change the world. That's it. You know, it sounds airy fairy. It sounds a little bit too dreamy, but the reality is that's what we want. We want the world to be a better place. Full stop. End of story. So yes, hold on one second. I have a nice comment here. I have to agree. We have to start somewhere. There is no right time to start but now. Absolutely. We have to. You know, it's been far too long. We've been left out far too long. And if we don't make a change now, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Hold on. We have another question here. Oh, okay. I missed some of them. Sorry. Apologies. Would you imagine 5 years ago that you will be where you are now? What were your dreams and goals back then? You can take that one first.
I love that question. Thank you for asking. I also love questions that make me think about my own life in that way, because, you know, when you're working in impact, it's so outward focused. It's cool to have that space. I would say that I have had the really deep privilege to take my career with a gut instinct approach. So every move I've made has been because it felt right, and there was an opportunity, and there were good people I wanted to work with. So 5 years ago, I would never have imagined in a tangible sense that I would be exactly where I am today. But I still feel like I'm approaching my work with a similar type of approach. And in that way, I'm really pleased, and I feel like it's a continuous thing. So my dreams were really to feel like I keep growing. This feeling of growth and momentum and impact and movement, like that keeps me going. And it's actually not so much to do with the specific goals and dreams. So yeah, thanks for the question. I guess my dream was to feel the way I feel, and we'll see where it goes.
Hey, so that really is like an addictive one, because this feeling is based on making impact. So that's a good one, actually. So as long as the drive to keep the feeling, is always there, then you will keep doing what you're doing, which is always good.
It's my compass.
Would I imagine 5 years ago? No, I couldn't have imagined it, because the journey to get me to where I am today was a journey that I had internally. It was an internal journey. And when I say it was an internal journey, oh wow, this is a deep one, but I'll keep it relatively short, which is as a Black woman, I had suppressed and pushed away the experiences of what it meant to be Black in the corporate world. So I'd pretty much said, things that have happened because maybe not even gender, maybe it just happened because it happened, and I didn't ever associate that it was anything to do with my gender or my color per se. And actually, the journey that I've taken in the past 5 years has actually led me, I've said actually a million times, has led me to the point where I've been able to embrace my experiences, my history, and to turn around and acknowledge that there were things that happened in my past that were because I was a Black woman. And being able to do that has then empowered me to use my voice to do what I do now. But hell, I probably wouldn't have even been able to see today this time last year in many cases. It's so unforeseeable for me. But going back to your point, Ida, about having a feeling, the feeling that you have in your stomach when you go to bed is a very different one when you know that what you're doing or what you're planning to do in terms of the impact that when you see it, that gives you a different feeling at night.
It does. And I also wanted to respond to the previous comment about starting somewhere and the feeling, combining those two, and say that it is a very, very brave act, in my opinion, to start somewhere, especially when no one else is starting. And me saying that I feel a sense of momentum, which I love, also involves great uncertainty, great fear. Who the hell knows what I'm doing is my question at the time.
Yeah. Right. It's a valid one.
It's the price that you pay for navigating impact. And I wish I could tell you that there's a settled recipe for how you impact the world. But the truth is that people, organizations, cultures are different, and they need slightly different things. And the best way to figure out what that is to talk to people, do something, start somewhere, and then maybe then also come back to a community where you can make sense of it all. But just to say, like, what you're doing, Leanne, and just this starting and trying, like, that's all anyone can do. And I think that is the start of impact.
Agreed. I agree with you 100%, because the fear, I think people, can underestimate what's entailed in making that. Will you be a social pariah? How will it be thereafter? Once you decide to make a step out of a role that people haven't potentially seen you in before. So, I mean, you and I could talk. You could talk. I could talk. We could talk forever. That's as much. I know. Like, I kind of wanted to pick up another thread, and I was like, no, because then I know you and I are going to take it.
We need a series, you and I.
I think we do. I think we need a series. We absolutely need like another checkpoint conversation to talk about the different things that we're doing, the different things we've been doing, because, as you said, this is one of those conversations that's just so motivational. It just G's you up to knowing what others are doing, and it takes away, you're not alone, but there is certain parts of a journey that you can feel alone. And it's always knowing that there are other people still fighting. We're all fighting different fights, but still fighting a fight to make sure that this world is definitely a more equitable place, a more racially just place, a more gender equal place, a more sustainable place, all these different things that matter. Because if we don't make a change now, then I dread to think what the future would look like for children, potential children, the new generation.
Mic drop number 2.
So on that note, I'm going to be dead cheeky because I got a nice little comment. Thank you, honey.
I love it. Couldn't agree more. Also, that's one of my favorite emojis.
Yeah, mine too. I think it looks amazing. So, Ida, where can the lovely people find you? Give us all your handles.
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place for me right now. Do what I do. Write me with or without a reason. Connect. I would love to hear from you. And yeah, so much is happening. So this is all growing, evolving. That's the nature of impact. And you can follow it all on LinkedIn.
Perfect. So everyone knows where to find me. LinkedIn at Leanne MM on Instagram. And I'm not going to bother with Twitter, even though I do have one. So it's been great. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Right.